Hey there, welcome to the Anchor Conversations podcast. This is Tyler here with Jason and hopefully sounding better.
Yeah,
We've been trying to fix my mic issues. So
this could be
oh,
a, I mean, this is a step in the right direction. I think we're gonna have to wait and see if it's if
people
it
could be listening to this going, it actually sounds the exact same, dude.
yeah, or whatever you did is way, way, way
Yeah,
worse.
or that.
I I don't know, but it's I think just to our ears right now, it's better. So we're working on it, everybody. Appreciate your feedback. We've gotten some really good feedback from some of you, just on maybe even some ways to help. But yeah, we're back. We're ready to roll. I think the summer's finally hitting. Today's definitely over 100 degrees, pretty sure. Kind of warm out there today. So here we go. I guess we're into it. My question here for you is if you have kids or maybe you have grandkids and listening to this, how bored are they yet with summer? It's only been about 3 school days for our kids. But then, there was like Friday they didn't have school. They didn't have school yesterday. Obviously, they wouldn't have had school anyway, but today, I guess like 3 school days, they're bored. It is like 3 days and they don't know what to do with themselves. What about your kids, Tyler? They've been out too, right, for a few days?
Two of them are out. Well, I guess James was never in. So the two that are
So
in
lazy.
school. Yeah, James, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
youngest, he's a baby. He just does whatever he wants.
He does whatever he
You know.
wants.
We tell him,
Yeah.
James, it's time to go to school, and he goes, "No!" And he refuses.
As most how is he 2? He's 2, right?
He'll turn 2 in June.
Okay, so as
So,
most almost 2-year-olds do.
yeah.
But still. Okay, anyway, so
No,
so
but
so
so
your
two
kids
of
are out.
them are out, and one of them is still he actually had school yesterday on Memorial Day. So yeah, but he's bored every day, even when he's in school. So,
Yeah. All right.
it's chaos around here, I'm sure.
It's chaos in totality for sure. It's just the
It
way that it
is.
is. Yeah. Good. All right. Well, I'm assuming that if you're listening to this and your kids are out, they're probably bored too. So you just have about 7 weeks left before they go back to school, 7 weeks of
Seven
boredom.
weeks, 7 weeks, uh, however many, what is that, 35 days? No, it's
Yeah.
not. Yeah, 35 days.
No, no, that can't be
Well,
right.
I'm thinking like school days.
Oh, okay. School days. Okay.
Yeah.
I was like,
So
wait, I'm not good at math, but 7 times 7 is not.
35 weekdays, to
Yeah.
keep them occupied and happy and to keep the snacks stocked and, all the other things. It's great, guys. We got this.
We
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 got
can
this,
do it,
guys. Let's
everybody.
rally. Let's
We're
rally.
doing
Let's
it.
put our rally
We're gonna do
caps
this
on.
together, all the way through the Beatitudes. We're gonna do this together. We'll be in it. So we'll check in. We'll check in and see how everybody's doing.
All right, well, let's jump into the Beatitudes here, because you preach from Matthew 5:5 this week. Blessed are the humble, or the gentle, or the meek, or the lowly,
Yeah,
or
it's a hard word to translate for sure. It means all
yes,
those things.
yes. Um, I like meek, but blessed are the humble. And your big idea was those who resemble Jesus will receive what everyone is striving for. And so I thought we could jump right in with discussing more just about these power dynamics, the difference between, humility and success. Those who resemble Jesus in his meekness or in his humility are going to find that success that everyone's striving for. So let's discuss just the power dynamics, the difference between that idea and the power and celebrity and success that we see in our culture today. What stood out to you as you were studying that, just that makes this call of Jesus, this invitation, different than what our world is defining as success.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that there's a dynamic in the world where so, when we think of humility and meekness, it just really doesn't roll off the tongue of people that are thinking about success. I mean, but what's interesting is I think some of that is having to do, and I mentioned this on Sunday, but with just a um, I mean, maybe misunderstanding. misunderstanding, I guess would be a good word, of what even what that word means. I agree with you that I actually do think the word meek there, blessed are the meek, is probably the best of the translations. I think that the reason that the Christian Standard Bible went with humble is because of the fact that nobody really knows what how to define that word meek. Like it's a weird word. It feels strange. It's because I think we have all heard the word, but I don't think, as we've defined it on Sunday, we don't really think of it that way. It's a way for us to have an attitude in and of ourselves in Christ, and then the expression of that attitude to those around us. And I think hopefully on Sunday, everybody kind of understood that point, that it's as we look at Jesus and he's with us and we're with him and the God of the universe, there's no way we can just stand there proud. Like there's no way we can be like, look at me, I'm great. Because next to the Lord, like we're not. And I think I really swallowed wrong. I think that as we think about that, like it should cause us to um, interact with people differently, and it should cause us to I really honestly see the world differently, so that we don't look at success as power, or success as money, or success as celebrity, or success as even in some ways as education, get better jobs, climbing the ladder of business. Although there's nothing wrong with having a good job and making money, and there's nothing wrong with that stuff. That stuff's not sinful. It becomes sinful when it takes over our hearts. And I think that Jesus' point is success is actually making it to the end and inheriting the kingdom. um when we inherit the earth or inherit the world, it's not like Jesus is giving us a bunch of money. What he's giving us is himself. He owns the world. He made it, and so he's going to remake it. And when he remakes it better than it is now. At the end of the day, I mean, this is a lot of the end times things, we could talk about, I guess, if we needed to. But when Jesus says he's going to make all things new, there is a recreation. The new heavens, a new earth, just like it is right now. It's just going to be remade without sin, and we're going to live there. And so our inheritance is going to be this earth, and this world remade in the image of Christ, which is perfection, which is the reality that he is going to be. And when I say the image of Christ, I mean holy. There's a holiness component to the new heavens and earth that doesn't have the sinfulness in it. So, I think that when we think about success, I don't want you to be thinking about like, okay, I just got to get a really crummy job and not make any money. It's not about that. If that's the point we're getting, that's not right. I think it's about what is our heart's attitude towards success, and are really, in some ways, are we giving in to what the world's definition is? And I think maybe some of the ways that we can evaluate that are, what do I maybe you ask yourself this question: what do I feed myself on a daily basis from the world? Like, am I spending 10 hours a day watching news media, listening to music on Spotify that has nothing to do with Jesus, that's being inundated with TikTok videos and Instagram and social media influencers, and that's what I'm striving for. I can't wait to just make it like these people do. Maybe you watch singers that are popular, and you're like, oh, this my whole goal in life is just to be that. I want to be famous. I mean, I think if you're younger, there's a huge push just in the culture to be a TikTok influencer, to be a YouTube influencer, just to be famous. Um, I think some of us desire to have fame in other ways. It's through success of money and bigger homes and another car, and to look impressive and all those things. I mean, those things in and of themselves, the desire to better ourselves isn't wrong, but when that becomes the whole motivation for life, I think this is what Jesus is trying to hit. He's like, it's not about what the world defines success as, the inheritance that you will get, which is everything everybody is asking for. It's just, I want to really take over the world in some ways. That only comes through looking like him and being his, belonging to him, being in Christ, and looking at God as being the one who is most important, and living our lives for him, and living on mission, and making disciples, and being discipled, and just growing to look like him. So I think that it is important for us to recognize that when it comes to the world around us, and figure out in some ways where we stand. Because that's a really important part of Christianity, is to we want to look different. We want to be different. The world should look at us as Christians and say, you guys aren't like everybody else. And that's really what we want to be striving for, is we want to look like Jesus. We don't want to look like the celebrity. And so as we think about that, I think it's just important for us to grasp it.
Yeah, I think you hit there, kind of the heart of the question, which is what is success, right? And maybe the lack of humility, even in Christian culture, is something, a diagnostic for us to realize. Oh wait, what's our definition of success? Is it what Jesus is calling us to, or is it something else that we've decided is what success is? Because humility or pride are in some ways a means to an end. Like, why is it that our culture, you find that so many people are so proud? Because it's rewarding. It gets you what you want. It gets you where you want to go. This idea of confidence or exuding confidence brings you to a place that's successful. And I think it's worth asking, is our definition in the church any different than the world's definition of success? When ministries are measured by their size, or their the money they bring in, or their platform on social media or whatever, have we defined success any differently than anyone else? And I would posit in a lot of cases probably not, which is why you find people who lack humility running those organizations, and which is why you find them acting like the people in the world. So it does get back to, it just begs the question, what is success? And for ourselves, is success, can I say with John the Baptist that what is success for me is that I would decrease and that he would increase? Is that success? Well, if so, then there's an invitation to humility. But if we can't say that with confidence, then pride is going to be the means by which we find success. So I think it's
Yeah.
important, just to probe that, what is, and even ask, as I look at my life's goals and my trajectory and where I want to be, what is my measure of success? And how does that square with Jesus, and why? Your measure of success could be something that would also match a world's measure of success, but then the why becomes the next important question. Well, why? Why do I want that? And do I really want it for the reasons I'm saying? I guess would be
Yeah.
the next question. So it's
And
kind of a hole that we can fall into, but I think it's a good one to fall into.
yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
You could,
I would say it goes, you can have really good things. I mean, you could desire to be the world's greatest, um, caregiver to the poor. And my success in that looks like how many accolades I get for being the world's greatest caregiver to the poor. That's not successful. You're desiring the wrong thing. You're desiring accolade for being a philanthropist that just loves to, you tell me how great I am for being humble. That's not, it's the same thing. So it's not just about, like, I think we can think about all sorts, it has all over the spectrum. Like, we just need to make sure we recognize it. I think that the truth is that, and this is hard for a lot of us to grasp, but our hearts have, our hearts have only a certain amount of love that can extend, and to desire for things, like to find joys and hopes and longings for things. We have a certain amount of it, and I think what becomes difficult, and what Jesus experienced this, because he's saying really hard things here, and pretty soon in the gospel narratives he'll say other really hard things, and a bunch of people are just going to stop following him because they can't take it. They don't know what to do with it. And I think if we're not careful, we'll fill up our hearts with so many things that the world tells us to love and find success in, that when Jesus comes along and says, actually, you're really happy and you're successful, you're blessed, if you're humble and meek, which means you have to let go of some other things that you've craved and desired and longed for. There's going to be some of us that at the end of the day, because we haven't disciplined ourselves to ignore what the world says and hold on to what Jesus says, are going to say, this just isn't for me. And I think that that's a really tough place to be in. Um, it takes a certain level. Like here's what I'd say. Stepping back, you go back 5 years in your life. You might be 16 years old listening to this. I don't know. You go back 5 years, decisions you made 5 years ago to what to give into, what to love and crave are affecting you right now. There are people who during during COVID, I think just made a decision during COVID to say we're gonna take a year and a half off of church because we just don't want to come close to coming back to church. And then when they did come back, and I'm not talking necessarily about Anchor, I'm talking about American church, statistics would show they made a decision to come back slowly. But what the problem is that decisions that they made in the past to not participate in the gathering of the body and the taking of the Lord's Supper and the participating in the fellowship of the saints and worshiping with the church body, decisions that they made to cut back on that are paying dividends today. Like that's the reality. So many people that used to be faithful churchgoers, loving the church, pouring into the church, now go to church and they feel like I don't know where I'm at in this. And part of that's because there's been so many years and months of just making small decisions that seem small at the time. I'm not going to go to church here. We'll go once a month. Now, when you try to fit not just the Sunday morning, that is it, but the giving and the communion and the listening to somebody talk about the Bible and singing songs, it just feels like I'd kind of rather just be on vacation or at home in my pajamas or not being here. I mean, it's decisions that we made years ago are making today more difficult or easier. We fall in love with the church and we can fall out of love with the church. We fall in love with the world. We can fall out of love with the world. We fall in love with wanting to be like Jesus, and we can fall out of love with wanting to be like Jesus. Like that's their decisions that are made. Um, they're daily, monthly, yearly decisions that we make. Church is an example, but there's other ones. We choose at times to be proud. I want what I want, and I'm going to step on people to get it. And you're crushing the part of you that's like, I want to be like Jesus. That's not who he is. But those are decisions that we make. And I'm going to choose to work 80 hours a week because I want to make X amount of money. And those decisions determine whether or not your family stays together or not. I mean, you're prioritizing job, money, success, quote unquote, worldly success over caring for your wife and kids or caring for your wife and your husband. And maybe you're a mom that works. Um, I just think we have to see it that way. Jesus is addressing all these things, whether that's poor in spirit, whether that's those who mourn, whether that's this one, those who are meek. Those are decisions that we've made that have led us to either be growing in our meekness, Christ likeness in our meekness, or leaving meekness and Christ likeness. Like we don't just stay the same. Like a status quo is something that is really, really difficult to maintain. I mean, we are either growing or not growing, and it's decisions that we make. And you might say to yourself, that sounds legalistic and you things like that. Well, maybe I don't think it's legalism. I think it's godliness, and I think it's sanctification, and I think it's growth. I think it's just reality. I think the less that we think about those things and the more we just let ourselves drift in the world, the more we're going to grow away from looking like Jesus. We will look more like the world if we aren't intentionally trying to look like Jesus. So when you talk about meekness and humility and gentleness and lowliness and it's strength, quiet strength. It's just this idea of like I'm going to live my life for the sake of the Lord. I am going to care for my family. I am going to provide for them like as a husband. I'm going to provide for my family. I'm going to protect my family. I'm going to love my family fiercely. I'm going to look like Jesus one day at a time. I'm going to move forward, and I'm going to do it recognizing that who am I except a sinner saved by God's amazing grace, and here I stand at the foot of the cross. And man, I'm going to treat other people like that too. Like, hey, everybody, look, I don't think I'm better than you. Like, I want to love the Lord, and I hope I die one day having served Him for the rest of my life, and that's my goal. Those are daily decisions that we make, and I think it's important for us to grasp that.
Yeah, I think one of the things you're hitting on is maybe an uncomfortable reality, which is that you're either following Jesus or you're not. And there's no there actually biblically is no, well, I'm sort of following Jesus, or I'm not following him very closely right now, or no, you're either following him or you're not. And the reason for that is because of calls like what we have here to humility, to meekness, calls like take up your cross and follow me. These calls that Jesus gives us, that he puts on our lives, these markers of a Christian, um, they are exclusive. You're either doing it or you're not. And in order to follow Jesus, it does take a meekness to come under him as Lord. He is my Lord, and I am following him. And I'm going where he goes. And most of the time, because of who he is and the reality of the broken world, that means I'm in a place that's not going to equal success by what the world around me defines it, because he's not of this world. His kingdom is not of this world. And that's not easy. And I think even as Christians, and I'll include myself in this, we like to have our cake and eat it too, which is we like to have our Jesus, and then we like to have all the cool stuff in the world too. We like to have our, get out of hell free card or whatever, but we also want to have, all the other stuff that everyone around us has, because it's really fun and it's really cool. And again, like we've said over and over, it's not that that stuff is evil or wrong. It's just, what are we living for? Or more specifically, who are we living for? It takes humility to say, yeah, I'm not living for the things I want. And if I get some of those cool things, great. But ultimately, that is not the goal. That's not success for me.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and we had a question that was sent in a couple of weeks ago that we didn't have a podcast that week, so we didn't get to. But I think it relates to this conversation and this idea of how we think about ourselves in meekness. You mentioned in your sermon that our attitude towards ourselves should essentially be, I'm not important. And I had mentioned a few weeks ago, in terms of poor in spirit, that our attitude towards ourselves should be, I'm the worst, as far as I am the chief of sinners, that we should say that with reality and with confidence. And the question was sent in then that I think relates now as well. How do we balance that thought, I am not important, while also the reality of valuing ourselves as a child of God? Both things are true. So how do we balance those things? How do we keep those things right in our minds, or how do we think about the tension between those two things?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't think when I said that, and I'm assuming Tyler, when you said this similar thing in your sermon, I don't think we're talking about some form of self-abasement or you know, you know, false humility, or even just, having this idea that woe is me because I'm awful. Again, like I said, Eeyore, yeah, I'm just an awful kind of person. I don't think it's that. I think it's recognizing we're servants. I think it's recognizing that we are, I mean, Paul, the apostles in the New Testament call themselves bond servants, which we could, and probably even the word is doulos, but it's slaves. We are slaves to Christ. A slave doesn't look at somebody, and let's make sure, like in Paul's days, slavery was more bond servanthood or servitude, meaning they were purchased, usually maybe sometimes to get out of debt or something like that, and they worked it off. They worked off a payment, And so we're not talking about like antebellum slavery necessarily, or like which is in the South in America in the 1800s. We're talking more about this idea of bond servanthood, or this the idea that I have somebody who I am serving here. This isn't I'm indebted to them. I'm indebted to the Lord because of what He's done. So when I stand next to Him in His glory, it's not that I'm going, oh man, I am an awful, awful, terrible person. It's looking at Him and saying, in holiness, well, why would I stand in front of the Lord and be like, look how great I am, Lord? I mean, that would be the height of foolishness. Listen, when you go to the Bible, um, even those who were really close to Jesus, John is a good example. But, John calls himself Jesus' best friend. Um, when John was in the presence of the Lord in heaven, he didn't know what to do with himself at the beginning of Revelation. At the end of the day, when he's standing in front of an angel, he tries to worship the angel because he realizes I don't have anything to I don't even know what this being is. And the angel says, "Get up, dude. What are you doing? Like I'm a created person too." John doesn't know what to do with himself. Because he recognizes his sinfulness, he recognizes his weakness, he recognizes his poor and spiritedness, he mourns the reality of, oh my gosh, I'm a sinner. What am I supposed to do? He's humbled, and that's just what he becomes. Isaiah in Isaiah 6 comes before the Lord, and he all he can say is, well, I am ruined because I'm in your presence. I don't know what else to do. Like here I am. I am just a person. I'm a created being by you. You made me. I am a sinful person. And if you remember that text, the angel comes and cleanses his mouth with a hot coal, representing just the purification of what the Lord does, and he sends him on his mission. If you think about Isaiah the prophet, none of us go, that guy thought he was the worst. Like we kind of go, Isaiah the prophet, like that's a pretty big book in the Old Testament. Lots of messianic realities there. But Isaiah the prophet lived his life for the Lord. But when you see the start of his ministry, he was poor in spirit. He was humbled. He mourned his state before the Lord. Um, even I think when you go even to Adam and Eve standing before the Lord after they sin, like there's a reality to them where they're like, I don't know what else to do. Um, so many times when the Lord shows up, Elijah, Moses, you just go, the people of God in the Old Testament, when God comes down, Hebrews tells us that they were terrified at the lightning and the thunder of the Lord when the presence of the Lord came on the mountain when he was there for 40 days with Moses, giving him the 10 commandments. They didn't know what to do with themselves. They were absolutely terrified. And they didn't even see the Lord. They just heard the thunder and saw the lightning and saw the cloud on the mountain. I mean, there's something where if we think that we can stand before the Lord and just be unaffected, I think that's foolishness for us to think that. Now, I will say at the same time, there's a strange balance which you're hitting on in your question in the scriptures between we should be rightfully fearing the Lord. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, the Proverbs tell us. And yet, there's an invitation in Jesus to come before the Lord with boldness and confidence, not shrinking back, but coming boldly and confidently to recognize that we are adopted into the family of God, that His love is upon us. And so I think those things do exist. But even let's just say we just see us, we go, okay, I'm going to ignore the fact that I want to see myself as less than the Lord. And that's how I want to interact with everybody. Like I am a created being. That's what I am. Here I am. And we just go, no, I'm going to be like a child of God. So I'm not going to be like the other one. Well, there shouldn't be a difference because we let's just say we're a child of God, not an angsty teen, in some ways, but a child who is just dependent fully on his father, like his or her father. Like there's something about that. Yeah, I remember when my kids were young, they trusted me with everything. They didn't think about stuff. I remember one time Titus just said, he was in like a bunk bed and I'm walking past, he goes, Dad, and I look over and he just jumps. I mean, I wasn't even ready. He's like, he's gonna catch me. This is what it is. There's a confidence there, but at the same time, an absolute trust of me and dependence upon me. He couldn't feed himself when he was younger. He couldn't go buy food. He couldn't drive himself anywhere. Like he was absolutely dependent on me. All my kids were. And I think that as we think about that, it should still, the same way, cause us to look up to him, at the Lord, and just say, who am I in your shadow, really, at the end of the day? So it's not, I don't want to say it's like a, you know, self-flagellation, like where we're just, we have a, like they would do back in like the 1500s, whatever, the monks just like take a whips and just like whip ourselves in the back because we want to just feel our pain. It's not that. It's looking at the Lord and just saying, when I consider myself in this world where I stand, I want to see myself in my attitude as a servant. That's what I am. I'm a servant of the Lord. Um, you have a lot of Christians who would not see themselves that way, but see themselves as people who are, I don't know. I don't even want to, but there's a difference. There's a difference between walking into the world and being like, look at me, everybody. I'm going to make something of myself and I'm going to be successful. I'm going to be rich and powerful. And that's what I'm looking for. And coming into the world and going, however, if the Lord wants to gift me money and that's how I'm going to serve people, I'll do it. Whatever the Lord wants. Like here I am. I'm in his hands. Why would I be anything more than that? And anything less than that? Like I'm just, this is who I am. I am like this in Jesus. So I think that that's how I'd answer that question, Tyler. I don't know if you have anything to add, but that would be kind of some thoughts.
One of my favorite things to do when I was a youth pastor was when we would go on retreats, usually to mountainous, beautiful places. I would spend my devotional times on those retreats reading the end of the book of Job, because you have this multi chapter rebuke where God answers Job out of the whirlwind. And, as Job is kind of questioning God's goodness, essentially. And, God just lays out who he is and the power and the glory in creation. Shutting the sea behind the doors, and he's there when the deer gives birth, and he's the one that has sees holds the gates of Hades, and just on. I mean, it's literally 3-4 chapters of just glory, but in the context of rebuke, of reminding Job, hold on, remember who I am. I am the one that holds the storehouses, the snows and the rains, and I release them when I want. I'm the one that can fish out, the deepest, most fierce sea creature with a hook, like it's nothing, just all this. I'm the one that feeds the lions. I mean, just goes on and on and on. And yeah, I've told people that is such a gracious moment for Job, such a gracious moment for God towards Job. And it's in the context of rebuke in some ways, because he's reminding Job, this is true of me. I'm the one that tells the sun when to rise, and it does. And I'm the one that loves you. I'm the one who has grace for you. I'm the one who cares for you. And I just think that those chapters in particular, if you've never read them or you haven't read them in a while, you can start in Job 38 just to hear the Lord speak from the whirlwind all the way through the end of the book, and you see Job's reaction. He repents in ashes. And I think it ties together these ideas of the humility, the viewing ourselves rightly. We look at God and we go, wow, yeah, I am not important, in the sense of I'm not the one who's holding the stars in place. I'm not the one who has made all of this and sustains it and one day will redeem it and recreate it. I am not that one. And yet the one who does all of those things has decided that I am worth dying for, has decided that even in my ignorance and my sinfulness and my lack of importance and the lack of impact that I can have, I am worth living inside of. The Holy Spirit is inside of us. Like, wow, oh, wow, that God wants to take up residence in me. And both things are true at the same time. And it's not until I recognize the reality of who God is and who I am in humility that I have access to that relationship with God. It's recognizing who we are and our need for him that gives us access to that relationship, that obviously he opened the way to, but that's the entrance, is recognizing that I'm not the center, but he
Yeah.
is. And because the one who is the center calls me a child, he's worth everything. He's worth following. And I think
Yeah.
it connects those two things in it. In Job, it's a powerful way to really just sit for chapters on end and think about the power and glory of God. And yet he calls you and me son and daughter. Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's really good. I think that it's helpful too. This is why reading the Old Testament is helpful. Job's great. Hosea. I mean, if you just think about that, that's a picture of what God's done for us. You know, Hosea, as a picture of the Lord's love, marries a prostitute who keeps going out and essentially just sleeping around. And they're married. Hosea married this prostitute, and he keeps welcoming her back in. If you haven't read Hosea, that's essentially a picture of Jesus and the church, the Lord and his people, just constantly prostituting ourselves to the world, and yet he constantly comes back. So it's not as though we stand in front and like we're shaking and fearful and like I'm awful. It's just the reality of what's going on. We have we have turned our backs on the Lord, um, through sin, through Adam, and he's redeemed us. And here we come like as a redeemer. Think about when we went through Ruth, like he's redeemed us, and we come before him, we're like, thank you. Like, what am I supposed to do? One of my dogs, Ralphie, he's like 12 years old now, but we rescued him. You know, he was abandoned at a hotel. They found him. We rescued him. He was 1 year old, when we got him, and I can open the front door. He's not going anywhere. He doesn't run away because he's like, I'm not going anywhere. Like, this is where I want to be. You rescued me. Like, I know what it's like to be abandoned. You guys didn't do that. He literally, I've never trained him to do that. He just literally, he might walk out front. He doesn't run. He just comes right back inside because he doesn't want to go anywhere. He realizes like, this is where I feel loved. This is where the ones who rescued me are. And I think that when we come before the Lord, part of that of not being proud is realizing I'm just a saved sinner, loved by God, and why would I see myself as anything less than that when it's because of that state that I am just God's lavishing his love on me, and I get to be here with him. And so I think that, yeah, just to add to what you said, I think that would be my 2 cents on the same thing. So great question, everybody. And you know what, the Beatitudes as we go forward, I think if we're not willing to be poor in spirit, to mourn, to be meek, it's going to be really difficult for us to be persecuted. I mean, there's just something like these are pretty easy calls. At the end of the day, like it's persecution that's coming, and we're gonna get there in the Beatitudes, the next number of weeks. So
Yeah, that's great. And looking forward to hunger and thirst for righteousness this week. And yeah, I just feel like as we this idea of meekness is so important, uh, for all the Beatitudes, because it really does beg the question, who am I living for? And am I going to come under the authority of God in his grace and in his love? And that's the invitation for us this week.
yep, looking forward to Sunday, everybody. We'll see you
All
soon.
right. Thank you. We will see everyone Sunday.